So I'm very excited because today we are sharing our agentic automations. So what agentic automations are, today they're pre-made templates that give you agents that can solve real-world problems for data people. These would include things like, reviewing your code, ensuring bad code never reaches production, doing impact analysis, customized Slack reporting, data quality, lots of data enrichment, and many more use cases. So, I'm gonna dive right in because we've got a lot to get through. So, the first part of our agentic automation is what we're calling blast radius. So, a really common problem we've found is that sometimes when you are building your data pipelines or when other people are building their data pipelines, you can sort of create changes that impact things adversely downstream. Now, as you guys will probably know, with Orchestra, we take the full sort of lineage, the whole, end-to-end lineage of everything you're doing, which means that actually we can use this to basically work out what's happening without you having to look at third-party tools. So this is just a very, very simple agentic flow. We're just going to run a dbt parse to get a manifest of your sort of current project. That's basically like some of the lineage. We're then also going to do the same thing, but with a branch. And what that means is you can trigger this from a sort of like a Git action. And you'll see here we've got this webhook trigger, and we're firing this from GitHub. Now, something Orchestra does automatically for dbt is it stores the manifest in the container, and then it also makes it available via API. So something we've done here, which is pretty cool, is we've got a Python task, which is literally just downloading those two manifests as the sort of next step. It's then doing like a diff, and then sort of getting a lot of other metadata from Orchestra as well. We're then sort of passing this to an LLM so that we can actually analyze what that sort of downstream impact looks like. And then the final step is just to post it to GitHub. So it's super cool because what you get is this sort of blast radius type work. So in this case, we can see that Orchestra has automatically commented from the user what's changed, what the impact analysis is, and it's also identified some cool stuff here as well. If I show you exactly what that looks like in Git, you can see we've got this sort of like Git action, and it's triggered a pipeline in Orchestra, and then it's sent everything back. Maybe just to add a little bit more detail, if we go to the PR, you'll be able to see that in terms of the files changed, we've got a really, really common one, right? So we've changed the name of a column, but that's not been caught in some of the downstream SQL. What we can see in Git is that the Orchestra agent has basically automatically identified this, and it's even suggested some fixes. So yeah, we're very excited about this one. It's obviously not limited to dbt because we have that underlying lineage. You could even put this Git action in like another team's repo if they're willing to do it. And then, the LLM would basically be able to work out, what their code changes are impacting you. So this is almost verging on data contracts. It's very powerful. Historically, this would have required something like another tool, like a Datafold or a Monte Carlo. But by using Orchestra and having all of this metadata in one place, we can basically do that all for you with an agent. And the best part is you can kind of build this yourself. So if you needed to sort of play around with the prompts, if you needed to play around with the type of output you want, that's all configurable. It's just a little bit of prompt engineering. So we're very excited about that one. That's blast radius. The next one I want to take you guys through is our code reviewer agent. So I'm sure oftentimes, you're sort of wondering why people write such terrible SQL. Maybe you're wondering if there was an easy way to fix it, probably wondering if it would sort of reduce any of your costs or make some of your data move a little bit faster. The good news is you can do that too. So, if you guys already have like a big existing corpus of SQL, like you can just run this and sort of work out what's happening. So we've got another dbt command here. The run is not necessary. You can just do a pass. Again, sort of going ahead and fetching the manifest. And then we're reviewing this again with AI. So a very similar pattern. And it's pretty cool. Like you can even change these two steps to perhaps be something like a Snowflake query, where you query the information schema and get queries that are taking a long time and pass those to the LLM. It doesn't have to be Snowflake. It could be Databricks. It could be BigQuery. And then again, in this case, we're actually going to post it to Slack. And we think this is quite nice. Like when it comes to Slack, if I just zoom out, you'll see that Orchestra is automatically going to send you some, highlighting the inefficient SQL patterns, some unnecessary order buys, and it's even going to give you that SQL as a sort of like suggested change. So, you could have this posting to GitHub, you can have it posting to Slack, you can have it as an email. It doesn't really matter, but this is just one example. So yeah, that's Code Reviewer, which we're very excited about. But we've got more. So another very common thing people ask us about is, can Orchestra tell me when stuff is taking too long? Like when there are anomalies in the pipeline runs, can you tell us about these? And again, like you'll detect a theme here, but because Orchestra automatically gets all of this underlying metadata, the team have basically written a script here that gathers some of that metadata, aggregates it at the level you need, and then kind of identifies those anomalies, puts it in a really nice clean table. And then the pattern is the same, right? We're going to summarize this data, we're going to identify what those anomalies are, and then you can sort of have those sent to you in Slack in real time, so that, instead of people coming to you and saying, my data's taking a bit too long today, this data doesn't look fresh, or, did marketing qualified leads really increase by 30% in the last week? You'll know about all of these anomalies ahead of time. And again, like you can see what this looks like here. So pretty cool, right? We can easily see which tasks are failing, where the errors are emerging. My DLT load is improved, but it's still got a lot of warnings. And I think this one is quite interesting. So the agent has told me that my S3 loads are sort of sometimes peaking at 4 minutes, 5 minutes, but last week it was all less than a minute. So something's happening there. And the next step will basically be to push more of the Orchestra metadata in to this alert, and hopefully it will tell us exactly what to do and how to fix it. So that is anomaly detection. So we've got two more. The next one is an agentic reporter, and the use case here is an interesting one because it sort of touches on like BI. So oftentimes we found that like people don't always go into the dashboards and check them. Sometimes people in sales marketing, they're quite bad at checking to see if stuff is always there. So what we can do instead is we can actually take that data, summarize it, and then send it to them where they are. So this is a really simple one, a really easy one to build. All we're doing is we're fetching some data from a database. We're generating that content with a prompt, and then we're firing it to Slack. So I can show you what one of these runs looks like. So in this case, like our query is pretty simple, right? We're literally just getting some data. And then the Slack content is really the fun stuff. So you put in a very basic prompt, right? Summarize the data, ensure you return something which is well formatted. The context is the data. And then we provide these instructions that generate a sort of nice JSON payload for Slack with Slack blocks. And that looks a little bit like this. So, a super, super basic example, but obviously if you wanted to like play around with the prompt and make this look a little bit more involved, you could do. Something like, you can clearly see here, right, is let's say you wanted to build an agent that like queries your BI tool and then finds people that haven't logged in for the last 30 days. We've all probably done that at some point, but this is another very easy sort of like cost monitoring thing that you can now implement in Orchestra as well. Cool. So the last agent we have is a enrichment agent. So we were doing a CRM move earlier this week, and it sort of made me realize that a lot of the data that we had was incomplete. I started writing a ton of really quite disgusting regex to basically to clean names and things like email addresses, cities, country codes, and so on. But really, what you can do is just use AI to do it. So if your warehouse SQL dialect doesn't support AI in a query, then you can just enrich it here. So in this case, we're fetching a bunch of data from Snowflake, and then we're sort of enriching it. We're doing something quite cool here because for every record, we're leveraging our meta engine, which means that you can process everything in parallel. So the output of the previous step is basically just a list of records. And then we pass that in as a matrix. So this basically allows us to parallelize everything. We then take all of those outputs, generate some SQL to insert it back into the table, and then we insert it. So that kind of looks a little bit like this. We've got the data coming in here, and then here we're enriching it. So if we go ahead and take a look at the prompt and the context and the output schema, you can see that the keys we're looking for here are extra things like the country, the capital, and the sort of time zone based on just one very small input. So nice stuff. And then you can see that what the AI has returned is this nice structured JSON that allows us to basically clean that data. And then we've gone ahead and inserted all of that into Snowflake. So you can see we've got that insert statement that's been generated on the fly. And yeah, like this is kind of what the data looks like in Snowflake. You can just basically grab all of this, and it's pretty powerful, right? Because anything the AI can do, you can now embed into your pipelines. And it's just like a very, very common use case for anybody doing stuff like customer 360. So these are our agents. We're working pretty hard to make them even better.